always think it's better to start at where did Franklin Public Schools start? And so some of you have maybe heard this before, but I think the timeline is really interesting. So in the 50s in the state, there were thousands of school districts. There were one school or one room schools across the state, and then you started to see them consolidate, right? So for us in Franklin, we were Ben Franklin, K-8 school district. We weren't Franklin Public Schools yet in the early 50s. And in the late 50s, you see us start to combine with Willow Edge and Countrydale. And then we moved into Countrydale Elementary. That's the existing Countrydale Elementary right now that a few of you have been in or have had their children in. So that was a one-room schoolhouse. And if you've been in it lately, it's been added onto, as you see through this timeline, multiple times and keeps extending out. In 1962, it's a kind of a celebration for the community. We become a K-12, and the building that we're in right now, not necessarily this space, was built in 1962, or the doors opened for Franklin High School. We become a K-12 district. Much of the building that you'll see tonight on the tour, and that you'll hear from our educators and myself about shortly, is areas that are from the 60s, are original to the building. There's been a couple updates as you see through the timeline throughout. For instance, right now we're in the Sabre Center. This was part of the successful 2012 referendum that our community supported. So the 60s, you see a large amount of growth in the district. We expand, Pleasant View Elementary opens, Robinwood Elementary opens, both of which still exist, that have seen some additions over time. You start to see some of the growth on a Countrydale Elementary. In 1970, Forest Park, the old Forest Park we'd call it, was built, and we have a middle school, right? And then you start to see now 5th and 6th grade shift between elementary and middle school. And I believe that's an important part of the story, because I think it talks about how this has always been a part of a longer range plan in Franklin, that we've always looked at and had the advantage of being a growing community, and how are we best serving our students, and how are we doing that with facilities we have, and growing when we need to meet those needs. So then in the 90s, we get back to some bigger growth again, and we start to see a variety of referendums coming through. So in the early 90s, this was for additions to a variety of our schools that already exist. And at this time, 6th grade moves to the elementary schools. We have Southwood Glen is built in the 90s, so that's when we went to 5 elementary schools, which is what we currently have. And then in the late 90s, we saw we still call it the new Ben Franklin, even though it's over 25 years old. So the old one, that was the original K-8 district, was raised or taken down, and we have the new Ben Franklin that's just down from the middle school. So exciting time for growth. You see these different spurts throughout Franklin, and like I referenced, we're continuing to grow. And that's not the case for all 420 districts in the state. It's a really nice advantage we have, and as we've done enrollment studies throughout this longer range plan that Mr. Sprague talked about, we know that our enrollment's gonna grow. We know we'll have enough space in our 5 elementary schools as they all grow to 3 sections, but we'll have to eventually, about 8 years out, look at boundaries. But that's not right now what we're looking at as a need. So 2012, we had the successful referendum for the space we're in now. The Sabre Center was built, amazing orchestra, band rooms, practice spaces, storage space. Behind this center were put in, science rooms and math rooms were updated, and some other classrooms were added on to the school. In 2016, which is the latest referendum that was passed, this was for Forest Park Middle School. And the community said, let's raise what's there or take it down and build a new Forest Park. If you haven't seen it, Forest Park's been open for about 5 years now. Call out anytime, we can give you a tour of it. It's a completely new facility. I think a couple unique things about it is that in 2016, that was for $43 million, and a couple more million that the district put in to creating and building that building. Right now, that asterisk tells us that building would be valued at $85 million. So that's not probably a surprise, or maybe a little bit, but I used to buy a gallon of milk for $5, now I'm buying a gallon of milk for $8 or $9. That cost has gone up everywhere, the cost of building has gone up. That kind of helps price check us to, that was a great referendum to pass. Right now we'd valued at $85 million. If we looked at a referendum down the road for a middle school, about the same size as ours, it's even higher than $85 million. 2019, the new Forest Park opened. 6th grade had been in the elementary schools. It moved back to the middle school, so now Forest Park is 6-8. Moving that out of the elementary schools allowed our elementary schools to use some more of that space because they were getting full, and also add 4K. So now we've become a 4K through 12th grade school system. And we've adjusted some of the needs where it was getting a little tight in those elementaries, so we shifted. You kind of see 5th and 6th grade shift in and out of elementary school as the district got creative in adjusting to the expanding population. So now we are a 4K-12 over the last 5 years. So where does that bring us today? So last February, we started doing some listening sessions to engage the community, and here's the needs of our district when we look at our long-range facility planning. Here's some ideas on what we'd propose to move forward. Then in April, hopefully you all got the survey and completed it in your mailbox, where we were looking at and proposing that we look at a variety of different pieces of this long-range plan through some referendum work. And then since then, that School Perceptions, who ran that survey, came back to the school board in May and presented the results. In June, the board worked to resolution to the referendum question that you'll be seeing on the ballot November 5th. And then since then, we've been running community engagement sessions and getting out to groups to make sure everybody's informed so you can go to the poll to make a decision however you wish on November 5th. That survey came back and said, there's support for a referendum. So this is exact results from that survey. We asked multiple things in the survey, and these were what the results told us. The first part of 3 projects was to look at maintenance across the district. And the survey said, yes, there's support to look at ongoing maintenance across the district. This doesn't mean we haven't had an amazing custodial staff that's been keeping up in buildings, but what it means is roofs, HVAC systems, windowsills, things like that that come reoccurring, similar to your house, are a bigger expense, and the budget doesn't keep up with that. We put $1.2 million into buildings and grounds every year, but some of those bigger things start to add up. The second project was looking at Countrydale. So as we think back to the history of Franklin, Countrydale's had a lot of additions, and it's getting to the point where it's aging out. To continue to put money into maintaining it isn't likely as fiscally responsible as looking at potentially raising and rebuilding. So we were asking to move it on land that the district already owns. The community said not at this time. And the third part was to look at some of the additions to the high school and renovations, which we'll talk more about today because that survey said, yes, let's look at that. There's support to look at these pieces of the high school. So community spoke, that's what a survey is about, see where the community's thoughts and feelings are, and that's what the school board took into consideration when they put together the resolution. We scaled back from what that survey said, and we picked out the pieces that looked to be supported. We had a 27% response rate on the survey, which is very high for any community. So we know that it should be a good read on where our community is at. So the referendum question is one question in kind of 2 parts. The first part is this 21 million of the 145 million is looking at maintenance across our schools. So that includes the 5 elementary schools and some maintenance across the high school. Different pieces that you'll see, ADA compliance. A lot of the ADA compliance pieces didn't come into play till the 90s. So if your building existed before then, you weren't required to update. But what that's led to, and we'll talk a little bit about it more specifically with the high school, is access for all students isn't necessarily there if we don't make some of these updates. For our elementary schools, there's similar pieces. It's looking at fire alarms, roof sections, building exteriors. A few pictures, because these are a little harder to tour. We're not going to take you up on a roof or walking through all the buildings, but these are some examples. So the top left is failed roofing, right? We've repaired sections of roofing. At some point, you need to do an overhaul of those roofs. Asphalt filling, deteriorating staircases. You can see safety concerns there. If you've come to athletic events in the gym at the high school here, you have to go downstairs to come in, right? That alone offers accessibility concerns for some, but it's also not the safest entranceway. Deterioration of windowsills, soffit crackings, just a few examples across the district. The second part of the 145 million, 123 of it is for facilities here at the high school. So you'll see a lot of this when we walk today. Some of it you won't see because it doesn't exist. And just to ground us, we're a Division I school district. So in the state, there's about 7 divisions, Division I being the highest, meaning that we are in the largest pool of schools. And so some of the things that don't exist that we're going to talk about through these slides are very typical if you've been in other districts to see for a Division I size school. So we've made it work, but the big part I always say is this isn't about wants, this is about needs. What we really look deeply at is where are there spots that we are overextended or students aren't getting opportunities because our space doesn't allow. Those are the spaces we're looking at through this $123 million at the high school. So right now, if we were flying over Franklin High School where we are, this is the high school. To the far right is the Sabre Center. When we looked at the 2012 referendum, it touched about 23% of this existing school that was from 1962. So that purple area is looking at what it is. This area, the Sabre Center we're in, is completely new. So that wasn't a renovation, that was an addition. And then if we walked out of the Sabre Center to the left, there's some classrooms that were added for English language arts and some math rooms that were renovated for more collaborative learning space. And then the parking was increased for the district, for the high school, I should say. Obviously, with the addition of the Sabre Center, they knew we're going to need a little more parking, and we still run into challenges with that. In looking at if this referendum is to pass, the colored portions of the screen right now would be what's worked on at the high school from 2025 through 2028. That may seem like a long window, but what we've really worked to do is ensure that if this passes, there's the least amount of interruption to learning. If we can avoid having trailers on site for classes, that's what we want to do. We should be able to achieve that through this timeline by carefully placing where we work on what pieces. But that gives us an overview of areas that would be, like I said, some is additions because it doesn't exist right now for a Division I school, and some is renovating areas that are original to the building. This phasing video, if you've already seen it, thank you for watching it again with us, but I think it's the best way in 2 minutes to lay out kind of what does that time frame look like, what's the overview of the projects at the high school. Okay, so to look a little closer at some of the spaces, first looking at our career and technical education. This will kind of be the second phase in the construction aspect, because we'd first need to move our athletic spaces to create the space to increase these spaces so that we can offer more opportunities for students. But one of our rooms that is called the basement of the building, it's kind of in the back corner of the basement, you'll experience that shortly, is our construction lab. So this was built in the 70s, and a number of these spaces for career and technical education, you'll hear a couple reoccurring themes of safety, because the space is tight. It's not large enough for the amount of students that want to take it. There's also wait lists, meaning there's students that would like these classes, but we don't have enough space to offer it for everybody. So there's opportunity there for students that we can't give because of the size of our space. And even the students that we are able to put in it, because sometimes classes are up to 30 students, becomes a safety concern because they're tight. When you look at the middle picture on the top, the students are building, they're probably about 4 foot by 4 foot framed mini houses. They learn the electric, the plumbing, the construction of those, and that's in the construction 1 class, because then they go on to construction 2, and like our students right now, well, not today because they're not in school, but Monday at this time would be out at our construction 2 site, which is building a house in Franklin community that will be complete before the end of the year and then sold on the market for a family to move into. So they're learning in a space that's pretty tight. If you're in there, or if you watch the videos online, it's loud. There's classes above it, our business classes. They obviously know when it's a day that the hammers are swinging because it's very loud above them. And it's not accessible by everybody. So if you're a student with mobility issues, there's career opportunities here, but our labs aren't going to offer you the ability to safely get into the spaces and learn. When we look at, even with the last slide and this slide, that middle section where it's light blue and green is where the proposed space is for this. You can see it's going to increase the space, which is going to increase opportunity. This is our metals and manufacturing. So there are welding booths within this space because of HVAC needs and things like that that have had to go into the building. It's really inhibited the lighting in those spaces and the safety and the size. And also in this room is the machinery. So the amazing thing is that our Sabre Manufacturing actually makes metal pieces for ATI, a business in Cudahy. They sell them to it. You know, they're learning production, they're learning how to make those. But again, the space isn't large enough for all the students to get in, and there's a lot of accessibility needs. All of these roles, whether it's the construction, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's autos that we're gonna go into next, there's opportunity for jobs once students leave. There's opportunities for jobs before they graduate. Most of our students, the 12 that are on site building a home, are gonna leave with internships or youth apprenticeships, and often the seniors with job offers that start right away, making a nice income so that they can start their life off right, leaving and graduating from Franklin. So family and consumer science or culinary or cooking classes or learning to sew. The facilities here, the amazing thing, if Sarah Heinvetter, one of our teachers, was here to talk to you, she'd tell you how they've grown from like 4 to 16 courses. We've had to hire additional staff, and they rotate through this one culinary lab. And what's unique is if we walked through Forest Park Middle School first, and then we came here, our students from 6th grade through 8th grade are taking a step back when they come into the high school to look at the facilities. You'll see the culinary lab. I'd call it a kitchen more than anything. It looks like my kitchen at home. My kitchen at home might even have a more updated stove, but it's definitely not representing what they're gonna see if they go into culinary. If they're working in a restaurant scene, you'll notice there'll be one corner of the room that we've tried to makeshift into looking like the culinary experience so that they get that, because they go into competitions and they're at a disadvantage against other schools that have those facilities when they go into these competitions. So you'll see those spaces, but right now we have 3 educators rotating through one lab, and the students are experiencing something quite different than what they would have had when they had culinary exposure in the middle school. The same for our manufacturing. Our manufacturing lab is very state-of-the-art at the middle school and spaced correctly. All students are getting an opportunity there. Then they're stepping into the high school with an interest, and not all of them are able to get that same experience. We have an automotives program. It's in a space built in 1974. The construction pictures you saw used to be the autos lab. It shifted to this space, and then this space was even downsized a bit to create more classrooms over time when we had space capacity issues. So things you'll note when we're in there, the ventilation is a concern. Often they're gonna have the garage doors open just to ventilate. The heating system does not heat properly. It's usually very hot down there, hardly ever cool, so those doors are open often, which is a safety concern. We don't want any access to abilities by anybody from the outside without coming through a front office, right? We have safe, secure entrance. That's a vulnerability. The sprinkler system is low in this room, so we have to get special hoists to lift the cars that don't go as high, and even then, the students they know not to go too high in the hoist, or they will hit those sprinkler systems and set them off. So those are a few of the things. When you see this space, I think it kind of speaks to just how tight or cramped it is, and think about it as compared to when you take your car into an automotive dealership. It's quite a different experience these days and much more electronic. that's not an experience that the students are having here that resembles what they'd have in the workplace. Physical education and athletic spaces is another part of the high school that we'll be looking at. So right now we have about over 1,600 students in the high school, and our high school gym holds about 1,100. So if we want to have an all-school assembly of any sort, or like we had a speaker that wanted to come in for a few classes, we have to rotate them through because everybody doesn't fit in. So it's a one plus station gym. Typical for Division I, when we did our research across the state, is a 4 to 5 court station. What that means for us is a lot of our high school teams are practicing either late into the night or off-site, like at one of our elementary schools or the middle school, even then late. So our younger kids are even practicing later into the night, being like 9:30, definitely not optimal. We did facility study. We would need 19 courts across the district to be able to end all practices by 8:30 at night. If this referendum's to pass and we build the field house with 5 courts, that gets us up to 13 stations in the district. So it'll help with reducing some of that time, but it doesn't still even fully meet the need, but it gets us to a better, closer space for that. It also allows our student body to come together in one space. Our dance has never had they seldomly have a practice at the high school, maybe 4 times a year. They're practicing at 7 o'clock at night at Pleasant View. There's unique experiences like that. The weight room, we'll visit the weight room today. It's 2 converted classrooms. It should have, by regulation, about 24 students maximum in it at a time. I'd say we stretch that sometimes, but luckily we have great instructors in all of these courses that ensure safety for our students. As a former female athlete, I would say it's not very inviting to our females because it's tight, and there's a lot of, like, the football teams in there, it may not be the most inviting environment. And I think that that's something important for us to consider. A lot of our athletic facilities in this building were built before Title IX, before you needed that equality in male and female athletics. So the spaces aren't always equitable in that way. The multi-purpose room will walk in also. It's the prior orchestra room. So when this referendum passed and we were able to build an orchestra room, the orchestra room was repurposed to be a multi-purpose room. So there's some groups like yoga and things that can practice in there. We run our rec department. They're able to put some courses in there, but it also is limiting. Like dance, it's not a big enough space or high enough ceilings for them to practice and for some of our other groups. But I think it's an example of getting creative in how we do use our spaces across the district. Our pool is original to the building. I always say it celebrates being 50 this year by leaking 1,000 gallons of water a week. There's not a lot we can do to stop that. We continue to work at it. The tiles on the deck surface and in the pool come loose, so our custodial crew glues those down every week. Once in a while we bring divers in when we need to glue them in the pool. Obviously that's a concern. We don't like the kiddos that are having cuts on their feet or bleeding on the deck that we're taking care of. Obviously that doesn't make families happy either. We'll show you the filtration room, but most filtration rooms to stay, even if you have a pool at your house, are run more electronically. Ours is hand done, so our custodial crew is trained in the proper chemicals to add to ensure that the water is safe for all of our swimmers. The pool's used full time, so it's a problem if we have to shut it down, and we've had to do that the last 2 summers for repairs. It's more typical to shut a pool down every 3 years for repairs, so that's extra cost to maintain an aging unit. So we'd be looking at putting in, instead of 6 lanes, going to an 8-lane, meeting WIAA, which is the interscholastic group that we have to meet for athletics, to be able to host more than dual meets at our pool, and also add in appropriate lighting, locker rooms, and area for spectators. It's pretty tight if you're in there in a dual meet, like I was the other week. Then looking forward also, we currently don't have tennis courts on site. We do have a tennis team. They travel to, I believe it's Greendale, to practice and to compete. So it'd be great for them to also be able to say, like the dance team, that I have a space in my school where I can practice and perform. It also allows us to expand our athletic classes through physical education. Our PE classes have wait lists just like our career and technical education classes. So this isn't just about our athletic teams after school. During the school day, these spaces are, I would say, overutilized because the kids are pouring into the hallway for classes, or there's wait lists also for those courses. So again, a need that's there for the district. think sometimes too, if you don't have students in the system yet, these are areas where through our rec department and just through being part of a better community, we are going to be able to offer more swim, right? Hopefully on the weekends we're able to offer some opportunities to get into the pool. Pickleball is something that's highly referred to through our rec department. People want to play pickleball. We can increase that access, or even tennis with having courts on site. So we know there's demand there. And we have a walking club in the halls at the high school already, but we'll really be able to expand what that looks like. And honestly, like a dream we have with the career technical education spaces is if we can right size and get that equipment there, can we have Saturday open hours where people in the community need to use some kind of tool that you don't typically have at your house? Can we have 2-hour open house on Saturdays once a month where that equipment is accessible by our community? I've seen other districts do it. To me, that's the right way to do it. It's a community piece. How can we get more community in to use this space? So the question is always, 145 million is a big dollar amount, right? That's not a lie to any of us. Even if we know costs have gone up, what does that cost to me as a taxpayer in the community? We know the average value of a house in Franklin is in the 400,000s. So that's $328 a year, or less than $1 a day. We've defeased money or invested interest back into our referendum debt over time. We know that 85 doesn't have an impact to the current mill rate. So the $400,000 home, $1 a day, you can kind of plug in where your house value is to know what that is personally for you. Or if you go to the website, there's a calculator right on there where you can slide it to your home value and know exactly what that means for you as a taxpayer. So there's a lot of information out there, and then sometimes there might be missing information you're wondering about. Hopefully we can answer those questions today. Otherwise, on the website, which is on the bottom of this slide, or you can scan with your phone, there's ability to submit questions. Some of you in this room have done that and know you get a response, usually in less than 48 hours. There's also frequently asked questions on the website that answer a lot of more common questions that may be received by team members throughout our work. And the Franklin Focal Point and the city newsletter, through our district newsletters, there's hopefully little avenues there where you've seen pockets of information that kind of feed into the work also. So we're gonna take the tour. This is the map. So thank you. We'll meet kind of in the back and we'll start touring.